Hi, it's Oliver, but it is a very busy front around here. I am primary external protector. No, I'm kind of one of them, but I'm technically a secondary to Josh. I'm a bunch of protection stuff around the front, and I'm clearly very good at this. And we are gonna do a system update mostly about Jade that we've been trying to decide how long to wait to know about some specifics and how many specifics that we do know are we comfortable sharing and all that. But we've settled on that, at least for now. And so, yeah, we're gonna do an update about that. Like I said, there are a bunch of people around me. There are actually more than it looks like. Yeah, that last anonymous picture is covering a bunch of other people. One who I'm going to be referencing without specifics, but also at least one trauma holder, a couple random persecutors, and a bunch of fictives are kind of randomly around right now. So just keep that in mind, I guess. I'm pretty solidly in the front as of right now, but there's a bunch going on around here. But yeah. So, fairly recently, but that probably means within the last, 2 months. I don't know. Somewhat recently. This year, for sure. And I think in the last few months, there was some kind of split that we are still not positive if it was a split from Jade or just a general split in Jade's subsystem, or kind of a shared split type thing where a new altar formed from little bits from a bunch of different altars, mostly from Jade's subsystem, or what exactly happened. Just part of why we took a little bit to film this. But there is a new altar who split in some way, who we're going to talk basically just about their roles, at least for now. But they're functioning as a personal protector and a personal caretaker for Jade and Jade's family, basically. In a similar way as with Jaden before that whole complicated multi-split situation, Jade was probably the second most in the category for us of doing too many jobs, particularly as a major trauma holder. So it was a little different in that Jade has to an extent split some of the trauma holder components, so she is not personally doing every, she doesn't hold every aspect of all of the traumas. How do I... So, okay. The way it worked for Michael and for Jaden was that they wouldn't have flashbacks while fronting so that they could do their jobs and then go inside and have basically delayed flashbacks later. They could be very triggered while fronting, they usually were, but they couldn't have flashbacks. Michael, I don't think ever did, and Jaden very, very rarely did. And I think that was the start of them not being able to function all of those roles anymore when they started to. Jade's subsystem functioned differently, and we've talked about this in some contexts before, I think especially in Kit's Meet the Altars video, but maybe to some extent in like times we've talked about subsystems generally, but part of the function early on of Jade's subsystem, because it was a trauma holder subsystem, was to have some of the alters, like especially emotionally, processing things while they were happening, so that whoever was fronting wasn't also emotionally processing whatever trauma was happening. But then they would have at least some access to those emotions later. So there's some amount that the trauma holding is like split up among, mostly within the subsystem, but also to some extent outside of the subsystem. But especially within the subsystem, it's not completely separate. So one of the ways that like functionally has worked for a while now is that they will kind of trigger each other. If any of them get triggered, anybody who has any of the components of that trigger, trauma, whatever, will just kind of also get triggered, and it can kind of spiral from there. And there had been so much communication improvement between Jade and Aura specifically, partly just like directly, but partly as a result of Jade externally processing things while Aura is front stuck and watching everything. But it had gotten to a point where Aura knew too much and communication was too good, where she could become a part of those spirals sometimes. So Jade also would very, very often have her flashback spirals and things like that in or very near the front, which is the opposite of how it worked for Michael and Jaden. And it's more of a problem, for us at least, because it is a couple things. Trauma holders and protectors, etc., in our system almost always feel more vulnerable fronting. There's like inner world trauma too, and that complicates things, but like to use Jade as an example, her inner world like form and everything, how she exists physically in our inner world, is quite a bit stronger in terms of if anything were to start happening inside than we are physically out here. But it's also less grounding for us to be triggered in or very near the front. Partly because I think it involves more, like it involves our body more. So our body reacts to being triggered, and that can like spiral triggers and stuff like that for us. It also affects other things. It, in a lot of cases, affects our physical symptoms of other stuff that we have. It'll flare up our POT symptoms, it'll give us vertigo, it'll give other alters who don't even know what triggers are going on panic attacks, just from all the emotions around the front, which that's one of the other things, is flashbacks and triggers and things happening around the front is way, way more likely in our system to trigger a bunch of other people. And because Jade's subsystem has split so many other trauma holders in various contexts, that can be a lot of people in some cases. And there can be even like unrelated triggers and trauma that overlap just enough in some way where like they're being triggered just by the like emotional state generally of like somebody thinks something bad is happening in the front, and then that triggers other people who don't even have the same, like, hold any of that same trauma, or so on and so on. And something Aura is not trying to word this nicely. She's not good at it, but she's not really equipped for it. But like a problem that she contributes to this unintentionally is she, by instinct, starts paying attention to the fact that we're getting triggered, which can be helpful in some cases to start, like maybe there's a specific thing we're doing that's the trigger. We're listening to something or watching something, and that's the trigger, and we can stop doing that. That's good, that's helpful. Or if she starts doing grounding things, etc. But because she knows so much about so much of Jade's trauma, she also by instinct, and like as part of that process of trying to figure out how to help, starts like guessing and narrowing down what the flashback is about. And her thinking about a bunch of Jade's trauma back to back spirals triggers. So essentially, there has been a little bit of restructuring surrounding the communication level and the integration level, not to a fusion extent, but mostly communication related between Jade especially, but to some extent that subsystem and Aura. Definitely not the whole subsystem. Aura still has, I think, about the same level of communication with like Snake, for instance, but it's at the point currently, and I don't know if this is where we're going to want to leave it. Like, we might be aiming for somewhere in between, but we're at the point currently where Aura typically doesn't notice directly if Jade is even around the front at all. So, like, she'll find out that Jade is around the front because I start talking to her, or I like react in some way and I say, like, we need to do this because of that trigger, and then Aura figures out that Jade's around and triggered. And then we're in the same spot if I have to, because I can't just tell her to stop thinking about it. We have to like do distraction type things, and then to some extent I can increase dissociation levels, which I use for some things like that. I also use to cut off communication, like with persecutors if they're directly targeting her and things like that. But to try to interrupt the spiral, I, in those cases, work pretty closely with that new personal protector of Jade's to try to interrupt that communication and essentially Aura's awareness of it enough to interrupt that spiral and to work towards getting Jade and whoever else back inside to process, because that's easier on them, that's easier on anyone else who's around the front, and that's easier physically on our body and on the rest of our symptoms. So it's better in all cases, unless Jade is trying to actively do trauma processing, like with our therapist, or like with a close friend or something, unless it's externally with someone else that requires fronting. As far as I can tell, in all other cases, I guess if it's by choice, like if it's not being forced in a way that's additionally triggering or something like that, it's better for Jade, for anyone else involved in any of those triggers, like with overlapping triggers and stuff like that, to be inside. And it's better for any of us around the front to not be getting emotional bleed and the physical stress and potentially triggering panic attacks and triggering other unrelated flashbacks, like I said. The like exhaustion, the distraction from whatever we were trying to do, like all of that shit. And then physically is just better across the board. So in terms of roles, we haven't like demoted Jade in any way, but we are acknowledging that we need to treat her and she needs to treat herself like one of her primary and most time consuming roles is to be a major trauma holder in order to essentially avoid what happened with Jaden. So that is more doable now with her personal protector and personal caretaker. She does a lot of her processing with them, and that makes it way easier for her to do it inside, which is, like I was just saying, better across the board for us. And that could very easily not be true for other people, even other alters in our system, I don't know. But in this case for us, in most circumstances across the board, that is currently better for us, for Jade and the other alters involved in this. So Jade is still a protector. She is still potentially involved in both external and internal protecting, but she is significantly less like on call essentially for both of those. She is focusing very heavily on just being a trauma holder, doing processing and all of that, but also on caretaking. So she's spending more time with her family, with her subsystem, and just in general. And I think that's going to be good all around, again, for us. We need to find the balance in some cases for like what level of separation we actually need between Jade and Aura, for instance. Because doing more of that than necessary could cause other problems. But so we're to some extent still figuring out like the balance of some of that and how to more easily have other alters from that subsystem who want to and are able to and are up for it, etc., to be able to spend more time around the front without it impacting like any of those problems, especially when Jade's doing a lot of heavy processing, because she is still probably both the host and primary protector of that subsystem. It's possible that's also in the process of shifting one or both of those, which could be the thing that solves this other problem. But because her role is so, like, has for so long been so front-facing for that subsystem, like, even before previous splits and fusions and everything, one or more of the, like, old Jade before all the fusions and Primal before all those fusions had for years and years between the two of them been host and primary protector of that subsystem. So that would be a pretty big shift, and that might take some time, and that might not be what they need, but we're trying to find that balance of how to more easily have, like, if Snake wants to hang out and watch something or play a game or whatever, or if the, like, the spiritual protectors, for instance, who are in that subsystem, if they want to do shit in the front, and to have that not end up starting any of these problems that tend to spiral. But it also, it helps in an additional way for internal things, because Jade is a popular target for a lot of our persecutors, so her not being around the front a lot prevents, not to say in any way that any of that would be her fault, to be perfectly clear, but this is like a way to deal with that problem in the short term. Also, because that also impacts the rest of the front if that's going on. So it's leaving a lot of the internal protecting stuff to the other very capable internal protectors, and not involving, like, I think it's, the way we would probably word it is that she would currently be a backup instead of a secondary for both internal and external protecting. And I think she's in a better place for that than before, but also especially around the front, we are in a better place for like having enough protectors for the various things that need to happen around the front. Because technically that shouldn't ever probably have been Jade's role. Like there was obviously a significant amount of external protecting that she did before taking over for Michael, but she was not built for this role. So I think this is probably going to be good for her in the probably short and long run, honestly, but also like a better fit in a lot of cases. So what this will likely look like, at least in the shorter term, is Jade not being around the front or in videos and things like that very often. If she is by default and basically always accompanied by that personal protector. We probably won't like put anything up for them. Like, they're one of many alters under the anonymous umbrella in this case, but in general, like, we'll probably leave that as implied, that by default, unless otherwise specified, Jade isn't up here alone anymore. So, yeah. And it's possible that especially the primary protector of that subsystem role might end up being, I would have two guesses. One would be that new personal protector, but the other would be Snake. Snake has actually been in a pretty major subsystem protector role for a long time anyway. And so I could see that just being one of her main jobs. Because a lot of her, like, kind of core roles are obsolete outside of trauma environments anyway. So, like, obviously she has somewhat of a trauma holder role, but in terms of active things, she also holds like more specific, she's less of a major trauma holder. She is aware of a lot of this, probably all of the subsystem trauma, but personally processes a lot less of it. Jade processes the most of the subsystem, and Snake would be one of the least, probably. So yeah, that is one of her roles, but that doesn't need to be her main role under most circumstances in the same way as it probably should be for Jade. So that wouldn't surprise me if that ends up making some sense, or having it be more of a shared thing, but we'll see how all that ends up going. And we'll see, like, maybe a lot of this will change as soon as we finish getting this video ready. That's part of why we delayed it for a little bit, like I said, is we weren't sure that everything was really settled yet, but it's been about like this for long enough that figured we could make this video, and then if it changes again, we can always do another update, so it's just an extra free video then. But yeah, that's where it stands right now. I think it's going to be good all around. We'll see if that personal protector ends up being comfortable sharing more at any point, but as of right now, that is what we're going to share about that. So yeah, basically the summary is that she is likely to be in content much less, and she's going to be able to focus on the roles that are more personal to her and are a better fit overall for her, especially as of right now. Who knows how much that would change down the line, but she stepped into a primary protector role out of necessity, and then stayed in it longer than she probably needed to, but we're in a pretty good spot for external focused protectors at the moment, so it's under control, basically, and I think she trusts us enough and is ready to do a different level of processing some of her trauma to begin with, etc. So it was time, I think, for some of these changes, if not overdue for some of them. So yeah. Oh, one of the things that's not totally settled potentially is her age. I know she is at least some of the time still an adult, and she has historically done some amount of age sliding a lot, and that sometimes coincides directly with processing. So I think there's a chance, though, that her like default adult age might be a bit younger than it was, because it was 27. And I remember her even speculating, this probably isn't my memory, Aura or Jaden or somebody that I have access to this information remembers her speculating that that her age might get fucky soon, because she has for a very, very long time always been a little bit older than the body age, but she couldn't imagine herself turning 30, and our body age was starting to catch up to her age again, and she was like, I wonder what's going to happen when that happens, because I don't think I'm going to turn 30. So yeah, she might be closer to my age, or she might just be spending so much time processing that we're usually seeing her younger, and so we're just assuming that. I don't know. And she might not even know yet. Her age might like not be settled yet or something. So yeah, she's definitely still, at least at times, an adult, but she does a lot of her processing younger than that. So yeah, I think that is all of the things. We didn't actually outline this one because we hadn't decided for sure until very shortly before filming this if we were going to do this yet and how much we would say. But then the people we needed to check with were around and in a place to talk it through and consent and everything, so I'm pretty sure that's everything. Otherwise, I guess look forward to a part 2 where we say everything I forgot. So, yeah. We're still figuring some of it out, but anything important that I forgot? No, don't pull me in. There's so many people here. Hmm. Oh, um, I think it's Sora. Yeah, that sounds like me. It's not? Wait, what? I'm not as solidly. Okay. It's kind of a blurry mix. Or probably still Oliver, definitely Josh and Raven. I think they're trying to make sure that it's me who fronts for the outro. Anyway, it's not even worth changing pictures or anything, so I'm just gonna do the end screen. Okay. Okay. Thank you for watching. That's like the last thing. But I guess it can be the first thing too. I'm worse at this with a busy front, I think. Let us know if you have questions or thoughts or ideas for other videos and things. As always, we'll answer questions if we're comfortable. Otherwise, we're obviously not going to ignore consent and boundaries and shit just because someone asked a question. So in general, I would say it's probably more like respectful if we have explicitly said we're not talking about something yet, to not like ask about that, I guess. Especially right after, like if you like asking for more personal information about that new protector when we explicitly said in this video that we're not talking about that could seem kind of pressury, if that makes sense. But obviously I know people forget about things like that, and especially for not doing it over and over and stuff, we'll be generally understanding. But yeah, we'll answer stuff we're comfortable with, and we do respond in some way to all of our comments unless we have like blocked you for some reason, but that has not been very many times. And yeah, so definitely ask questions and give us ideas and things in the comments. You can also just say hi or say if you have similar experiences and things. We like hearing from people, and we like hearing if it was helpful in some way or something you hadn't heard about before or whatever. We can also do things like that on Discord, and that, along with a bunch of other stuff that you can see on the screen below me, is linked in the description. But also make sure to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications and all those things. And Uh-oh. Why did we get so switchy? Might be Josh now. Jeez. Okay. Nope. You might need to do this. We're seriously seconds away from the end of this. Okay. It's all over again. Just going great. The amount of chaos up here. There are some impatient victims who want to rewatch their source. Okay. And a bunch of other shit too, but yeah, you can see all that stuff in the description. And we're gonna be trying to film fun, longer things that we haven't done in a while soon, if we are up for it. So look forward to that. That's a good reason to turn notifications on. I think we said the thing about video ideas, but that is very helpful if you have ideas for things that we haven't done, things we can react to, etc. Or even just things that you're excited for that we haven't done in a while. It's good to know about those things. It doesn't always mean we can do it right away, because sometimes there are reasons we haven't done the thing for a while, but it could also just be that we forgot about it or haven't prioritized it for whatever reason, and hearing someone say that they're excited for that thing could make it happen sooner. So yeah, keep an eye out for fun stuff coming soon. Fingers crossed if we're up for it. We'll see if we can manage to do some more streaming. But yeah, I think that's everything. And before we keep rapid switching, let's wrap this up. So thank you again for watching. Bye.